Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stratch Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list and the patch notes really quickly at the start for patch 14.2. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out a lot on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. It's most nights starting between 11:30 and midnight, and usually going till about 1 or 1:30. So a couple hours most nights. And I'm going to try to see if I can start being a little bit more consistent with tier lists and some other videos and things like that. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I figured I'd just talk about the patch notes really quickly. Here's a quick flash of the tier list, and then I'll just kind of talk a lot about S and A, and then I'll mention a couple of kind of honorable mentions in the B tier as well. But just so you can kind of see where we're going with it. Stat shards. So I haven't noticed a ton of difference as far as this has affected the meta in the support role. There's some of that. I think the biggest thing is if you're playing a champion that doesn't have a lot of sustain, then sustain can become an issue because things like armor scale really well with like health potions, sustain, that type of stuff. So you get more value out of your effective health when you have armor and magic resist. But so in a longer attrition style fight where you're constantly poking each other, working through your potions, all of that in bot lane with really heavy harass, that's going to favor the aggressors in the early game, not because the fact that you don't have the armor and the magic resist, right? And it's probably similar in the solo lanes too. Like the harassment champions are going to benefit more from this. But for all in, especially if you take the early health rune, I think that's about the same, and it might even be more difficult to all in depending on the champion and whether or not they scale with bonus health and that type of stuff. And for later in the game, if you take the scaling health rune, this might actually be better for some champion. The scaling health, by the way, breaks even at level, or it becomes more valuable than the flat health at level 7. So that's the same that it was years ago, and they used to have flat health on various runes. So if you think you're gonna, be in an all-in situation and every single point of HP is gonna matter, especially like in levels 1 to 3, then maybe take the flat health. But if you think that, it's not gonna be that big of a deal to wait on your health, and the scaling health is probably gonna be the better option. I don't know about the 2% movement speed. If you're playing a champion that roams around a lot, maybe something like a Bard, Blitzcrank, that type of thing, maybe that's going to be worth it. But I think for, at least champions on the more aggressive side, the adaptive force is probably going to be better. So like on Rakan, Senna, stuff like that, adaptive force is probably better. But maybe the tanks are going to like the 2% more. Or they might just... I feel like tanks are probably just going to get the scaling health instead there. So, I don't know. I feel like there's not going to be that many champions that want this. It's like either harassing champs want the adaptive force, or tanks are probably going to want the scaling health. But if you really need the movement speed, it's there for you if you want to go for that. The defensive option, I think the tenacity and slow resist is probably not great because it stacks multiplicatively with Merc Treads. So I think that's not quite as good. I don't remember the exact math on that, but if you really, really need the tenacity, I guess that can be okay. But I think it's people are probably going to pick a health option. Again, if especially levels 1 to 3, the all-in health matters. If you're against, I don't know, Nami Lucian, and you're going to try to fight him at level 2 or 3, or Tristana, Leona, stuff like that, then this is probably going to matter. But again, if you think you can survive, then this is probably going to be more beneficial later. Even though as a support, you're rarely going to get to level 18. Again, even at level 7, it's going to start to be more beneficial to do that. So I don't think it's shaking up the meta too much. It's just champions that don't have sustain in their kit. Tanks like Nautilus, Leona. Leona's still doing pretty well, though. Might have slightly worse matchups against like your Xerath, Lux, Zyra type of lanes, but overall, I think it's fine. Okay, jungle, companion, whatever. I guess the healing is up a little bit. Smolder, I haven't really looked at the preview, so I'm not sure about that champion yet. That's January 31st. It's kind of odd to have it halfway through a patch. Usually it's 1 or 2 days into a patch they'll release it. Ari Charm, okay. Still don't see that champ a lot. Blitzcrank, now this one could matter because you're losing the armor rune and your base armor is down. So he is a champion that might care. I mean, if you have the movement speed, that's going to help you roam, but now you're going to be down 9 armor early on in those all-in situations. So, and he likes to get into all-in situations early, so that's going to make him a decent amount squishier. And his total AD is down a little bit. Now, keep in mind, that's not bonus AD, that's total. So that's still going to, affect his damage, his all-in potential a decent amount. So I think he'll still be good in the early game, especially against immobile stuff, your Jhin, Misfortune, Enchanters, that type of thing. So he'll still be pretty good. I did nudge him down just a little bit because that he might still deserve to be an S tier, especially at lower elo brackets, but I feel like he definitely will be squishier against other champions that also want to all in early on. It's just going to depend on who gets the engage first. Okay. Briar is nerfed a little bit. That's probably fine. Actually, I guess that's quite a few nerfs, right? Healing is down, bleed down, Q damage increase, damage type changed to magic. That's odd. I don't like the mixed damage stuff most of the time. I guess it makes comps a little bit more versatile, so you can't just stack armor. But it's also worse for penetration. But I don't think she typically gets a lot of penetration items, so ultimately that's probably a good thing for her. Okay. So I think that's fine. Briar seems like a pretty good champ, but not completely unreasonable in my experience. Okay, Camille, a little bit tankier early on. Slightly lower passives that gives you more trade opportunities, and your Q bonus movement speed is a little bit higher early on. I think that's fine. I think Camille can be a good champ, but I don't really know what's holding her back, honestly, because she was super OP years ago, but I think they've just slowly trimmed power off of her, and then other champs have risen in power a little bit, so I think she's still really good once you get enough items at a certain point, but I don't know if this is enough to make her, amazing in the meta again. Okay, Darius, Q cost decreased, healing based on missing health increased, and E passive armor. So the big thing about Darius is he lost Gore Drinker, so the Gore Drinker plus Decimate, massive healing to keep him alive is no longer there, and stuff like Sterix also has been nerfed over time. But this should help him out a little bit. I mean, he still is pretty one-dimensional, but if you can, pair him, get him on the strong side where he's going to be getting ganks and he gets fed early on, and then if you have some way to sort of boost his movement speed later, he does usually take Ghost. But just some stuff to let him stick to people and get into fights, especially against a bunch of other melee champions. I think he can still be okay, especially at lower elo brackets. Ezreal, I've not played with or against Ezreal in this patch, but these do look like substantial buffs. I don't think his win rate really moved that much. A little bit. I mean, 51.5 is pretty good for Ezreal. But what is he building? Ezreal's big problem is he doesn't really come online historically until he gets 2 or 3 items. I mean, I guess single item he's kind of online if he gets it fast enough. But then if he goes this Muramana, it does stack faster than it used to. But until that transforms, that is kind of a weak point in his build. Spear of Shojin, huh? I mean, that does make him tankier, which is cool. Your spells deal extra damage. His Q counts as a spell, even though it does physical damage, I'm pretty sure. So, you could get up to, 6% increased damage? He's okay. I mean, he's very skill reliant. He is good at surviving if you're going to be weak side or if your support has to roam. He's one of the best. If your support, you know, your Blitzcrank just perma sits on middle or goes up to fight for Void Grubs or whatever, roams around with the jungle, then he's very good at that because he can farm from so far away so easily. So he is probably one of the best weak side ADCs. So they made his Q hit a bit harder. Now it scales more with AD. So if you get to kind of the bigger AD builds, that's nice. This is doing 100%. 100% bonus AD. Okay. So they're giving him better scaling. So he's going to hit a lot harder later on in the game if you get sort of heavy AD items. It's interesting people aren't building like any sort of lethality on him. I mean, his W does magic damage and his R is magic damage. So lethality's a little awkward. But I know people were at least doing Duskblade for a little bit there. But I think that's just because the item was super OP. His scaling is just so atrocious. Unless you're just super far ahead. It looks like the Essence Reaver is more popular, but Trinity Force is more powerful. Yeah, Navori could be good too. I mean, Shojin has a higher win rate, but Navori's more popular. Kind of makes a bit more sense to me too. His Q can't crit, which is odd. If they ever gave his Q a chance to crit, oh man. Then he'd be really good, but... Anyways, okay, so moving through. So he's probably a little bit better, but unless you're extremely good on him, there's probably better options. Most of the lethality ADCs are going to have higher impact early and later. Fizz nerfed a little bit. That's probably good. They nerfed his item too, Storm Surge, which is still good. This champion just can't ever be in the meta for very long. He's just so obnoxious because you can't interact with him very easily because he's got that E to dodge stuff, which is kind of a fun old cat and mouse, but when he can just jump on you and just one-shot you, it's a problem. I wish they'd go back to explore, like, sustained damage Fizz a little bit more. I know Tank Fizz was seen to be toxic back in the day, but I think if he was just more of sustained damage, didn't one-tap you when he went in, but he could just constantly, like, dance around you and just kind of, you know, death by 1,000 pinpricks and bleeds and things like that, I think that would be a much more unique and interesting playstyle for him. So I don't know what that would look like. Maybe they'd have to reimagine his ult. Or maybe his ult would put some debuff on him where they take extra damage for so long, 10 seconds or something after it hits him. I'm not really sure what it would look like, but I think that style of play would be easier to balance around. Rather than just having him be OP, one shot, uninteractable, and then having to nerf the hell out of him over and over again. Okay, Garen... buffs, that's probably fine. I don't think it's going to change his spot in the meta too much. I'm okay if Garen's not in the meta. He's such a brain dead champ. I mean, if you're I don't know, he's fine. I feel like the simple, like, straightforward champions should be, like, good in lower elo brackets, but they should almost never be played in higher elo brackets. If they're that good, it's just difficult because there's just very little counterplay to them usually if they're super simple. I don't know if that's entirely true, but it's just not as much skill expression in there. It's just stat check typically. Okay, Gragas buffed a little bit. 20 seconds off his cask is good. I think he's getting played some in like mid lane and pro. I don't remember how good he's doing. I feel like I don't see him that often in solo queue. Yeah, he's fine. Okay, sure. A little nudge is okay for him. He has a kit that could be interesting for bot lane. He's got the E, which is just basically a like a free dive or like a free move or whatever where you can get over walls and things like that. A free dash, kind of like Rakan. So that is nice. But I don't know. It's like the ultimate's obviously pretty cool for support. The fact that you can interrupt movement with your E is pretty cool. But I feel like maybe the W is definitely lackluster as a support. The Q also a little bit is as well. But they can't really buff him too much because he could be too good in solo lanes. Maybe they could nerf his sustain or something and lower the cooldown on his E so he can do it more often. I'm not really sure. But he's okay. Gwen, this champion's obnoxious. I really hope she doesn't come into the meta. It's just so difficult to interact with her when she's got that her little circles up, whatever it's called. But okay, Wei, I don't know. This champ just seems like he's just never good. But okay. Alawi, sure, a couple of buffs there. Jax nerf. It's good that, speaking of pretty brain dead stat check champs, I mean, Jax does, I guess there is some, like, cat and mouse with his Counter-Strike in a lot of matchups. You know, you have to time it right. He's got one ability that, you know, requires some skill on it. But Jax, in my mind, is very similar to something like a Garen, where I just don't really want to see him be viable at higher levels. But he kind of almost always is, because his stats are just ridiculous, especially when he presses his ult. Karma. Now, a lot of people thought that she was going to be really good, because these are some pretty substantial buffs, but it's just if you get a lot of AP. And as a support, it's really hard to afford a lot of AP. So it's like, on paper, the numbers look pretty big. Like, oh my god, you know, that's like 30% more scaling on her AP on the E. And then if you, like, ultimate her E, then that means that it's going to give everyone else a bigger shield. And it's like, it is those things, but still, at the end of the day, Karma does push early. She pokes well, which is cool. But she just doesn't have a lot of reliable CC. Like, you've got your W, which is a delayed route. But it just feels like there are modern champions that just do a lot more than Karma does, especially someone like Melio, where it buffs your allies, you know, gives range, you heal everybody for a ton and remove a bunch of CC from them. You've got single target, bigger or just as big of a shield as she does. You can still harass, like, not quite as well as she does early on, but... And then someone like Lulu as well, who can shield and protect, but also offers, like, really big steroids, like extra on-hit damage. And that was always her problem, is her scaling is just not that good, unless her empowered E is just, like, super overpowered, right? Where it just gives insane shield and insane movement speed. Then she's good, late game. But, you know, maybe you'll see her paired with Ezreal. I don't know if they'll try that in Pro or not, but that's been a classic connection. And they both got a lot of buffs this patch, but I just don't quite think it's enough. I think they just need to... Either they're going to have to just keep buffing her E until it's OP again, or change something about her kit. Maybe make her W, like, insta-root or something like that. I don't really know what the answer would be to her, but I think she needs some kind of major adjustments in play patterns. Okay, Karthus buffed a little bit. Okay, that's probably fine. I mean, that's pretty substantial Q buff, because remember, it's double damage against isolated targets. So, that's substantial. And then the magic resist reduction on the Wall of Pain. So that's okay. I mean, Karthus is a power farm jungler. It is, you know, potentially a power farm meta. So, and he does take things like Baron, Dragon, Grubs, all that stuff pretty quickly if he's uncontested. But he is really squishy, and he can just get completely blown out by anything that wants to invade him. So, I'm not a huge fan of him in most solo queue brackets, but maybe in higher elo, you can see him. There's also a lot of answers to his ult now, too. There's a lot of magic resist items that are available. So, Locket is an extremely popular support item that's really good right now. Kaenic, Rookern, Wit's End. Like, there's a lot of stuff people can do to try to counteract the Karthus ult now. Okay. Why are they buffing Rumble? Rumble's extremely strong right now. Is this just a typo? Q damage increased? Okay, it's literally just a typo. Okay, so Q damage decreased. And the magic reduction decreased. Okay, sure. Alright, that makes more sense. Okay, Shen, base damage. It's not going to matter, I don't think, for Shen. I'm glad Shen's not in the meta. It's very annoying to deal with that for Engage champs. Although, I don't know. He does offer some answers to Engage, but as someone who plays a lot of Engage champs on a personal level, I don't want to see Shen in my bot lane every game constantly. Okay, Teemo. They just can't let Teemo be relevant for more than like a patch, you know? It's got to keep nerfing him until he's back down to like 50%. Okay. I've been saying it for years. I think they just need to reimagine Teemo as a support. Just make his mushrooms give like max ward vision instead of just like that little shallow vision. Maybe lower the cooldown on him. If you need to drop the damage, that's fine. But I think just really lean into his ability to hide and set up traps. And if someone hits a mushroom, maybe they take bonus damage or it lowers their magic resist for 5 seconds, or you know, just something like that that would be more kind of team oriented type of thing. I don't know. I think I would like to see him more as a support than a harassment top laner, because it just seems like they just can't ever balance him right for that. Twisted Fate ADC. Okay, I mean, I haven't seen this in action, but they added a lot of crit and AD modifiers. I don't know what his win rate is. I don't know if you'd even see it in bottom lane or mid. I don't know if you need to see him, like, mid. 51%. He's not played that often. He's still really short range. He's like 500 range. I don't think that's going to matter that much at the end of the day. Let me see what his overall win rate is. It's at 53%. Are people even doing the AD thing? Not really. The AP's still more popular. So, like, this is cute. I thought it might amount to something, but it looks like it's still just, like, not quite enough. Stack deck giving a lot of extra attack speed and quite a bit of extra, like, bonus AD scaling. But it's just not quite there. Extra health on Vhagar's, okay. Bloodsong nerf. It's going to be a nerf to, like, Senna, Bard. There were a lot of champs that like to do this, so they'll have other options, so it'll be fine. Experimental Hexplate. And, I mean, you can still get it, too. It's like 2% less damage, which does add up, but I just don't know a lot of champs that are going to want this item. It's just such a weird item. Maybe there's a couple, but it's probably still going to be irrelevant. Frozen Heart nerf. It's still good at 2,400 gold. But again, I wish they would just trim like the mana off of that. But they just leave it on there because it's just free and nobody cares about it. Let's see. Horizon Focus probably doesn't matter. Champions that use this a lot already attack stuff from higher than 700 range, but maybe this will open up some new users. Phantom Dancer. Okay, I don't know. Maybe that matters. I don't feel like I see a lot of champs getting that. Rift Maker costing a little bit more. That's probably fair. AP champs are doing really well. Steel Sigil. Okay, sure. And then Storm Surge. Minus 10 AP. And then less scaling, 20% for melee and 15% for range. This item still feels extremely powerful. It just does too much. It's like a lot of AP, has a lot of burst damage that scales also with AP in the kit, so you get a lot of power immediately, and it scales later in the game. And it gives you a lot of movement speed whenever you trigger it. And whenever it explodes, it can be AoE and hit a whole bunch of targets. So, I just think it's doing too much. I think they need to knock some of that off. Honestly, just probably shouldn't even have a ratio, period, on it. Is what I would fix. Just make it like 100 to 250 or something like that. Like, maybe make the base amount scale a little bit more or whatever, but just no AP ratio on it. So I feel like that's where you get into trouble when champs have like 800 AP and the passive's doing like 400 damage or something like that. Okay, Stride Breaker, little buff, it's probably fine. Support items, can't do the double support anymore, I assume. Bounties don't show up as often or for as much to the losing team, which is okay. And then there's a bunch of bug fixes, which is fine. Okay, so let's talk about the sport tier list. I know we spent like 24, 25 minutes there, but I'm just trying to roll them all into one here just so I can get one video out for you guys to cover it. So, Maokai, I just kind of have to put him number one right now. I've tried to play him a couple of times, and it wasn't that great, the outcome, but Uh, the champion itself obviously has a super high win rate right now. It's like 58% or something in Emerald Plus globally. And he's picked a lot. So it's like almost 10% with almost a 58% win rate. So if you see that, that means something's like mega OP in solo queue. So yeah, I mean, he's just really good. So my problem with him was that like you didn't really have an escape if you have to play weak side on him. But again, it was just 2 games I think that I've tried to play him this season, and we did pretty well. But it's like if you get camped by the jungler and baited into going in, you're just probably gonna die because you don't have any escapes. It's sort of like Leona. I mean, there's a lot of engaged champs that are like that, and I'm just kind of spoiled playing Rakan a lot of the time, where you can just almost always get out of anything. But you know, if you're respecting the weak side and you keep throwing those seeds up, the seeds are like fantastic extra vision that kind of lasts forever. So that's a really underrated quality of Maokai, is it should be very difficult to gank him. And obviously he fits very well with the new item. So Trailblazer is phenomenal on him. He always liked to get Dead Man's Plate. He's one of the few supports that got that with Bard. And now you have a much better version of it. What's better about this than Deadman's, I've been asked about this on stream before, is because you get the team movement speed with it. So whenever you go in, then your team can follow up with you, or you can rotate around, you know, 2 objectives, or even just going back to lane, and your allies move a lot faster with you. And it scales based on your movement speed. So if you get something like Swiftness Boots, then they're going to get a little bit of benefit off of your extra boot movement speed as well. So it's just a really solid item on Maokai. And the big thing is he has a ton of CC, but he's very short range for an engage. So I think this is, it doesn't say it here, but I believe it's like 500 range, might be 600. But I think it's 500 range on the W. It's undodgeable when you get there, so that's nice. You do have to be careful, you know, making sure you don't get pulled under tower or pulled over a wall when you don't want to be. But it's pretty much undodgeable. So especially if you have your flash up, just flash W, classic. Pretty much, if you're getting a gank, then they're going to die. So that's really good for him. And then obviously his ultimate is a really, really long piece of CC. So, oh, I didn't even realize it. I forgot it gives you the movement speed, like massive movement speed for 2 seconds. So if you hit them with the R, then you can very easily get it and follow up with your W. So that's really handy. And that'll leave that huge trail. When you get that movement speed, that will leave an empowered trail as well off of this. So yeah, if you open up with this from pretty far away and you manage to hit people with it, you can run your whole team in there pretty quickly. Pretty close to, not quite as Shirelia's, but it's a lot of movement speed. If you have Trailblazer. So all of that works really well. Your Q is pretty good damage. I mean, it's 270 plus 4% of the target's max health, plus has an AP ratio on it. Low cooldown of 5 seconds. So he does like pretty decent sustained damage. You can knock stuff back. It only knocks it back if it's within a very close radius to you, though. It's not the entire length of the Q. So it's pretty hard to time that correctly, and there's a little delay on the Q too. But technically, you can knock someone out, like a Rakan who's trying to jump on you with his W. You can knock him out of that W before it gets that upward motion, if you're really quick. It's hard to do. A lot of times, he's still going to hit you up, but you'll hit him too. So, very good with Trailblazer, very good with Frozen Heart. He's one of the few tanks that actually does care about the mana because you're throwing out those seeds so often. That's helpful. And then just all the other tanky items, options, you know, he's going to love. So stuff like Locket. Slay is also quite good on him. I don't know the range on that, but if someone hits one of your saplings, for example, that's a slow, and that's going to allow you and your ally to run them down. So if the support's, you know, trying to fight for vision, and they let one of those saplings hit them, you can just roll up on them with the Slay, collapse, and potentially get some kills. So he does have a lot of catch potential. He's very good at vision control. As I said before, a lot of different build options, great utility for your team, tons of CC. Just really, really good. You just got to respect the weak side. Make sure you keep those seeds up and just don't get caught going in to a bad situation. and learn how to let people die too, which is very important. Your seeds can help. The slay can also help people escape. If someone's trying to run away, you just throw a seed in there. It pops. It slows somebody. They get that movement speed out. So that's really good too. Makes me kind of want to play some Maokai. Check it out. But he's very good against Rakan too because of that point click. Who Rakan is less popular than he was last patch, but he is still picked and he is still really good. So lots of great matchups, and he does have sustain. So he's not going to be affected by these shard changes as much as someone like a Nautilus or a Leona, because he does have that sustain to kind of make up for the fact that you're potentially going to have less effective health early on. So it's pretty good. I think you definitely want Zombie Ward almost always if you can get it. Relentless Hunter is good. He does have a really high impact ult though, so I might consider Ulti Hunter as well. It should be a kill every time your ult's up if you're getting the right angles. But he does like to get up on people too. However, if you're going to be getting Trailblazer and you're going to be getting Swiftness, you're going to get into the soft cap for movement speed, so you're not getting full value out of that. So I don't know about Relentless. It is good, but Ulti Hunter I feel is pretty good too. Anyways, Maokai's super strong right now. Rakan still really good. His win rate is down a little bit. It's like 52%. And I think that's actually good if you like playing Rakan, because he was getting picked like 10% and he had like a 54% win rate. I'm not sure what's bringing him down. Perhaps the popularity of Maokai. I mean, Senna is also pretty good, and she's getting popular against him. So a lot of these top-end champs, Bard's also pretty good against him. But he still has, outplay potential on all of those champions. It's really hard to lock him down to keep him out of the meta. But Trailblazer is still a great item. I get Mercury Treads almost always. There's a lot of CC. Obviously, if they don't have a lot of CC, you don't have to get it. If they do have 3 or 4 really heavy-hitting ADs on their team, you can get plated steel caps as well. I found myself buying those a little bit more these days than in the past, because there are a lot of auto-attacking ADs that are really good right now. And it does allow you to get that extra armor early on, especially against like a lethality matchup. That can be good. I feel like Ionians are kind of a trap now. I very rarely get these, although you can if you want to. Especially if you're going to get tankier items, it could be good. But you did lose the 5 ability haste, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. They did lower the price a little bit, but it just feels like you're quite squishy if you get that. So it's up to you. But I tend to like these defensive boots a little bit more these days. And they do, at least Mercury Treads has a higher win rate, and Steel Caps is pretty close. But to be honest, they're all pretty similar. Frozen Heart, even after the nerf, if they have, again, like 3 or 4 auto attackers, can be a good choice. I don't find myself getting Zeeks that often. I think if you do want this item, I would probably get it first, because that's where you're going to get the most value off of that 50 flat damage, because that doesn't scale at all. So 250 damage early on is good. One thing that's a little awkward with Rakan, with Zeeks, is that typically you will want to be running into a situation with your R, and then you'll W somebody. Usually you have to wait a second or two and try to juke out their piece of CC or their dash or whatever. So a lot of times, and you can't even RW instantly. Like, you literally have to wait a half a second anyways. So that means that you're wasting part of the potential damage on Zeeks. If you're running in and you're waiting for like 2 seconds trying to dodge the Lux Q or the Morg Bind or bait the Ezreal E or whatever it is you're trying to do, you're losing out on 100 damage, maybe 150 if you have to wait for 3 seconds. So that's a little awkward, and typically you don't want to stand in there and just stand still a lot of times, because you don't have the most resistances in the game or HP or whatever. Like, Rakan really wants to go in, get that CC, and then go back out with his E. So that's a little awkward too. If you stay in there, you could get baited by Zeeks to try to stick in there, get that damage, get a couple more auto attacks, and then you get CC'd and blown up. So it's always been a bit of an awkward item for Rakan. The stats are really nice. The extra slow is cool. Obviously, if you're in a situation where you're hard winning and you want to win more, this is very good because then you can just stick to him with that 30% slow. Because Rakan doesn't have a lot of CC after his R plus W hits. So having that extra piece of CC, for 3 seconds to slow them down so your ADC can run them down and, get that kill is really good. So if you're snowballing hard, I think Zeke's can be good. But I don't know if I would get it second because by the time you get Trailblazer and then you get Zeke's, it's going to be 20 minutes into the game. Everybody's going to have 1,500 health, 2,000 health or whatever. And then dealing that extra 100, 150 damage off of Zeke's just may not matter as much. I'd probably rather have something that's going to be better for team fighting. So either Locket for the shield or something like Frozen Heart if they have a bunch of AD. Or even something just to protect a key person on your team that's really fed, like a Knight's Vow. I just feel like they're probably better options second because the damage is just not going to matter as much. Although it is still nice. It's up to you. But that's just one note I would say on the builds is I really have not used Zeke that much. Maybe I'm wrong for that. But I've still been doing a lot more Trailblazer into usually Locket, occasionally Frozen Heart, or Knight's Vow. It's typically what I'm running. Slay is okay. I will say the bubble item, I've actually liked this item a lot on Rakan. Because it allows you to protect somebody without the burden of having to CC them. So if if you don't want to use your CC in that instance, or if it's on cooldown or whatever, this can still protect them. And it's on an 8-second cooldown. So, reducing 140 damage doesn't sound like a lot, but it's really like giving them a third Rakan shield, right? So you've got, your shield is usually 140, you get 2 of them, and now it's like you get an additional 140 on top of that. So that can really make the difference in protecting someone from an all-in, especially from an assassin, right? If you've got Guardian plus Locket plus this bubble thing, then that's going to be really, really good. It's going to stop a whole lot of bursts from coming their way. You do, add on the extra 90 damage, which is kind of whatever. But I just like it because in a lot of, especially extended fights or skirmishes, you can probably trigger this twice. So that's going to be, 240 damage that you're going to get to block and 90 bonus damage. It can also block things like tower damage, which is pretty handy. So even, it doesn't reduce true damage. But it's just good. It just feels like it's always available and it's always adding up. It doesn't have, insane numbers on Rakan typically because you're not using it on cooldown every 8 seconds, but it's pretty handy. I think the Slay is the other one that a lot of people have been getting fairly frequently, and the movement speed is nice. It does heal for 120 on you and somebody else but you have to slow or immobilize. That means you have to hit them with your ult or with your W. And sometimes, again, if that assassin's coming in, the Fizz just landed the fish on your ADC, and you're just trying to stop them from dying, you may not have enough time to CC somebody. Or a tower hit's coming in, could kill somebody, and all your stuff is on cooldown, but then the bubble, comes up, and you're able to shield them for that 140 again. It's good. So it's just a little bit less conditional. The 90 movement speed is very nice, though, but it's also only up every 20 seconds, so you're only going to get this once per fight. So, there are a lot of situations where you could get this. Now, if this was shield somebody, if that was an option as well, and you could use this to help you engage, that's cool. But the problem is, by the time you already CC them, you're going to have been engaged, right? You're going to have already hit them with your W or your R, and where you really need that movement speed is where you're trying to run in to juke, the CC and to land your W on them to begin with. So it feels like it's okay, but it's not amazing. You can use it to escape as well, but again, you're going to have to use your W, which basically self-stuns you for however long. So it's okay. I mean, if a gank's coming in and you knock them up with a W, that's pretty common. Then E to your ally, this can help you both potentially escape better. So it is good. I'm not saying it's not good. And maybe it's possible you should be using it more, but I just feel, especially in solo queue, where fights tend to get extended, people don't close out. There's just a lot of skirmishing. Just having that bubble always available, every 8 seconds, just feels like it's a bit more useful. Celestial Opposition is good. This is what I was getting a lot early on, and this is probably what the default is in Pro, especially if Rakan's the primary engage. So it does stop you from dying in really like highly coordinated fights. But I feel like in solo queue, it can get broken off. So it's about the same. People actually get Slay, it looks like, more commonly. But it can get knocked off. There's a lot of just random poke out there, especially like Maokai Seeds. There's just a lot of weird poke that can knock this thing off of you. And it doesn't do anything to help your allies. So that's the big downside there. It's like, yeah, it keeps you from dying, which is great, but it doesn't do anything for your allies. And I always think with Rakan, if you can get away with doing stuff to help your allies, you should be able to deal with most situations, right? You have so much mobility, so much flexibility in your build. You can build armor, you can build magic resist. I just feel like you can balance it out and get this protection from somewhere else. Now, if they have a lot of CC and you're just going to get evaporated, like you're going to have to go in and they've got Vhagar, Amumu, Maokai, something like that on their team, where you're just going to be CC'd for like 10 seconds and you get Mercury Treads and do all this stuff, but you still might die, then yeah, Celestial Opposition. Or if you're just like hard feeding, or some like 10-0 Diana keeps focusing you, then yeah, maybe get it. So it's not always bad. But think about it. I think the, Dreammaker could be something that is interesting to play around with, especially if you're skirmishing a lot. Okay, but let's move on. I know, a lot of people like to hear my thoughts on Rakan because I play it all the time. But that's sort of my thoughts. I think he's really good at the meta. He's flexible. But that's, what I think about some of the recent build options on him. Okay, Senna actually is pretty good. Pyke was kind of a bust as far as the lethality stuff. I don't think he's done as well. But Senna has been doing pretty well. She had a bit of a rough start. I think she was under 50%, but now people have kind of found new builds on her. And I think if you end up getting a matchup into something that's going to let you scale, then she's obviously going to be really good. So if you're playing against like Enchanters, Janna, she's good into Rakan early on, or pair her with some other like hard poke champion. If you put her with something like a Jhin or Caitlyn, Jinx, and you're up against double melee and they can't really charge into you that well early on, or a low range ADC, so like a Lucian. You don't see Vaynes and Sivers that much, but those types of things, she can really feast on those if you're good at, landing your Q and then getting the auto attack for the follow-up. You got to be able to stack those souls. But if you're good at stacking the souls, if you play super aggressive in lane, especially if you're strong side, right, if you're not going to get ganked, if you're going to get camped and ganked, it's still a problem. She doesn't have a lot of great ways. Well, once I was going to say she doesn't have a lot of great ways to control vision like Maokai to protect against the ganks. But once you get Umbral Glaive, and if you take Zombie Ward, which you should, I don't know why you're not taking Zombie Ward with Umbral Glaive. That's so many free vision, or free wards, I should say. Then that can help you out. But you got to be really careful because you're going to be highly tempted to keep wanting to push them in and just go up and grab those souls. And you are going to hard dominate in 2v2s, especially if you have like a lethality ADC or some other like really spooky ADC early. You're going to be able to win almost everything. But don't get overconfident. Don't get ganked. That's the big issue there. So she's going to have a hard time all-inning and like forcing kills on people early. Your W, if you land it, can help with that. But you're really just a early poke, but later game scaling type of champ. You also want to be a little careful if your team is over-indexed on AD, which happens a lot right now in the meta. If you've got an AD mid, AD jungler, AD carry, getting a fourth AD could be bad. So, they're going to get a lot of value out of their Frozen Hearts and Ninja Tabbies and all that if you do that. So, just be careful. But on the flip side, if you need extra AD, right, if you have an AP mid, AP jungler, and you're just going to run like double AD bottom, that could actually be pretty good. So, Just Umbral, Ghostblade is what people are doing. Nothing too fancy. Fleet footwork is just, again, going to allow you to get up there, get that poke, get that harassment. Presence of mind, while you're landing that harass, is going to just constantly be refilling your mana bar. And that's going to allow you to, spam more Qs, more poke, more healing. So she's a unique, very interesting champion. Maybe I'll take a look at her again. But, yeah, she's really good if you scale, if you can get to late game. But she doesn't have any engage outside of her W. I guess the W, like, if you land it, can be helpful. But, she can otherwise be pretty strong. If you get grubs as well, if you think your jungler is going to be able to fight and get the grubs early, she's really, really good with grubs. Because obviously she has the range to harass the towers pretty well. But yeah, it doesn't roam particularly well. Ghostblade does help a little bit with that. But you are squishy if you get caught out. Does have a lot of movement speed with Boots of Swiftness and all of that. Still is probably going to want to get Bloodsong for the harassment. Gives you a little bit more utility, which is cool. Even though the win rate's down on it, I just don't really know what else you would probably want on her. I feel like Slay is maybe underrated. It's got a really low win rate, though. But you already have quite a bit of movement speed, so I don't know. She's good if you have the early harassment, if you want to scale for later. You've got that high win rate up to 20 minutes, kind of the Caitlyn curve here, and it's kind of bad for the next 20 minutes, and then it's really good again once you get your, third item and you've got a bunch of souls. Okay. Especially if you think you're going to get a lot of laning time, if the lanes aren't going to break, if you're not going to get camped. Can be pretty good. Okay, Bard also is pretty good. I had people ask me about this, and you hardly ever see Bard in Pro. And frankly, I think he's still pretty rare. He's getting picked a little bit more in solo queue. But, like, what's up with Bard? Why is he strong right now? I've played Bard. I've actually haven't played a ton of games on Bard. I think like 2 or 3 games. But I think I've won them all. And he's just very good with these new items. Like, the problem with Bard historically is that usually he's just really bad with traditional scaling items, particularly like AP items. Had just been pretty weak on him. And he just didn't have a good mythic. Like, he just didn't benefit or care about a lot of the mythic stuff out there. But now that they've done away with the mythic items, and some of the best items are these tank items, the tank Bard is actually pretty good. His base stats are okay. They're not as high as, like, traditional tanks, but he does quite a bit of damage just off of the meeps. If you go around and you collect the meeps, he does a lot of damage, and a lot of times he can just about perma-slow on a gank if you have enough meeps. Or if you have 3 or 4 meeps and you start autoing, they're going to be slowed for 5 or 6 seconds. So I think it's a second and a half slow. It might only be a 1 second slow on the meeps. But either way, it's quite a bit of damage. It's a nice slow. He has really unique gank angles with his E, and he can take allies with him, so it's pretty easy to get around vision. Your ultimate is really flexible, so usually you'll just want to do it to engage, but a lot of times you can do it to stop channels, so like a Jhin ulti or a Xerath ulti, you can ult them to, shut them up. Someone who's going to get, like, Karthus ulted, you can ult them to save them. Someone who's going to die to an Ignite tick, you can ult them to save them. Obviously, you can ult towers to stop Shelly from charging them, to just stop damage off of the towers. So it's just a very unique skill that has a lot of different applications, but it can go very wrong, too. If you throw it in the middle of a team fight and accidentally hit your own people when you don't want to, or save an enemy, right, buy time for them to get their cooldowns back, that can be an issue. So you got to be very careful with it, but it can be powerful. He's got the sustain early on, so you can pretty aggressively trade with him. And then the Q is kind of odd, but if you have champions that do want to group up, or if they're in a choke point or whatever, or you just get the right angle with a wall, it can be pretty good. So especially against, like, Rakan, if you can land that Q when he tries to E over to somebody, that's brutal. So, pretty good champ. If you like sort of a hybrid, tanky champion that also has some damage and roams really well, but you're okay with giving up a lot of like guaranteed CC, then he can be pretty good. So you don't see him in pro because most pros are not willing to give up the guaranteed CC if like a Nautilus or Recon is virtually guaranteed in a lot of situations. Um, but he can be pretty good. So uses Trailblazer really well to go get the meeps, to roam around, obviously, and then Frozen Heart is pretty good on him as well because he is close range. He has to get in there to land his auto attacks. So yeah, it just scales extremely well with those items. Okay, and then so these are kind of like what I would think of as mostly top tier, although the tier 2 can be really good as well. So these are all in a way kind of top tier depending on the situation. So I've got Melio up here too, and I'll talk about these a little bit faster because I would like to finish this in an hour or less. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Melio is seeing a lot of pro play. I don't know that his win rate, I don't remember if it's amazing or not. It's pretty good. 53% for being the most picked support internationally is pretty good. And I've always kind of wondered why Melio fell out of favor because his kid is so good. So he's got the Q early on, which is decent harassment. It is a pushback. It's basically like a better Janna Tornado. It doesn't go through all the minions. But it's pretty nice because it does push them back. It's got that kind of delay. So you can stop mobility if you're lined up correctly. You can stop a Recon from dashing in. Or you can stop like Leona from going in, Nautilus from going in. So it is really good that it kind of has that Janna peeling effect to it. He also, with his W, unlike Janna's like, she does that. It's okay. This thing hits hard, too. They buffed this a while ago. I don't think you still don't max it, but it's pretty good. I mean, it's up to 340 damage. Has a little slow on it as well. But the W is quite nice early on, especially if you take Aerie. So every time that shield, every time that healing applies, it's going to check for Aerie. So whenever Aerie is there, then it comes back to you, then it goes back out, then it comes back to you, then it goes back out. So I think over that time, you're getting at least 2 Aeries and possibly 3 if you're standing right on top of them. Remember, Aerie has to travel back to you before it can zip back out again. I think this patch they made Pix go faster on Lulu, not Aerie. But either way, what that means is when you put this up, it not only heals for quite a bit, but it's also going to shield them early on for a lot, right? So it's going to give like somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 80 to 120 shield on top of the 70 healing whenever this is up. So it's a big deal. And it's also going to trigger the fire it up every 3 seconds. So I assume it does it instantly, and then every 3 seconds thereafter. So you're going to get 3 fired ups for extra damage, and you get extra range. So it's a hell of a trading tool. It's one of the best like range trading tools you can ask for early on. And I believe those heals also continually stack with Lucian, who's pretty popular right now. And Lucian gets empowered every time he gets healed or shielded. He does extra damage. So if you pop that on a Lucian, he's going to do a hell of a lot of damage early on. Every time he's, using his abilities, he's going to be doing a lot of damage. So really good combination there. Great with like long range champions, your Jinxes, your Caitlyn, stuff like that as well. So just really good at trading early on. Decent peel, very nice shields. So 180. Remember, you can apply this up to twice and it stacks. So you can get a 360 shield with a 0.6 ratio, and you can give somebody up to 40% movement speed for 2.5 seconds. I don't think that decays. Or you can split it up and put it on 2 people. So it is a pretty long cooldown. It gets down to 13 seconds though. But man, it is really hard to burst through this guy early on, right? If they get that double shield, that's a 360 shield plus your ultimate. At level 11 in a team fight, it's going to be a 250 heal. So you're looking at like 600 effective healing and shielding on him before scaling. So just really, really good. Great trading, great scaling. He doesn't have any abilities to start fights. And that's the real reason why I have him down lower, is because he can't start those fights. You are still relying on your team. However, he does have the movement speed up, so kind of like Karma. He's just a better Karma in my mind. So he can speed up if you have other engage on your team. And the reason he's played so much in pro is they'll play him with like a super high scaling ADC a lot of times, or Lucian early on. So they'll put him with like a Phelios or Lucian or whatever, and he's so great at protecting. And they'll just get the CC and the engage from somebody else. So in solo queue, if you have that CC, if you have that engage, he's good. Otherwise, it's like maybe, maybe not. I think his win rate is not insane in solo queue. It's like 50%. So he's okay, because like he can get outscaled by something like a Sona or a Senna. If it's just you're just sitting there and farming off, he could potentially get outscaled. And like you may not have the coordination to take full advantage of his ultimate and that cleanse effect. But nevertheless, still really, really good champion. In pro play, probably S tier. In solo queue, higher ranked solo queue, probably S tier. But I think for a lot of people, I'd probably put him in A. But again, if you've got an ADC that you know is going to do really well or is super high scaling and like you're going to be able to take full advantage of his kit, I think he can be really good. Okay, I have Nautilus up here. Nautilus is another one who is very popular and pretty successful in pro, 55%, pretty high pick rate. And it's the same story it's always been with Nautilus. Guaranteed engage, right? So I think his R is like 800 or 900 range. You just press R on them and they're going to get hit, right? Unless they have Hourglass. There are very, very few things in the game that are going to stop that missile from hitting your target. It's a huge knockup. I think it's a second knockup and a half a second stun when it lands. Virtually guarantees you're going to land your Q after that unless somebody like body blocks it. So he can force fights. I think that's the, just the big hallmark of Nautilus. Now, the problem with him is he can't hook over walls in solo queue. He has a fat hitbox on his hook, so it's very easy to hit open field compared to most other supports. But he can't hook over walls, so that is going to limit some of your opportunities. I think they changed him on this patch. I know they said they were going to. I didn't see it in the patch notes, but I believe his Q is a stun now instead of a root. So that is going to make some interactions not work as well. So like an Ezreal E out of it after he's already hit with the Q. I don't think that's going to work anymore. I'm not 100% about that. But it is going to make it better in some situations. He can escape with the Q, so that is nice. If you're getting ganked, you can hook a tower. So that's handy. However, he is squishier. His W is still pretty weak of a steroid compared to like a Leona and her shield. So, and his base stats are a little bit lower than some of the other big tanks. So he is a little bit squishier. He doesn't have sustain. The fact that you get scaling health on runes is really nice though, because his W does scale reasonably well with max health. One thing that I don't see a lot of people doing, but does have a higher win rate, is this older school build on him where you max the E first. Seems to help out a lot. So you max E and then probably W and then hook. So people had gone to maxing the hook, which is what they're still doing first. But this is what's been nerfed over time. So it does less damage and has a longer cooldown than it used to. I'm pretty sure. So this gives you chances to fish for the hook, but it's only single target damage. And the hook is not a super long piece of CC, right? It's okay, right? It's a hook. But it's only 4 seconds difference on this. As far as the cooldown goes, and the E is so much more damage, especially its AoE. It can hit multiple targets. It's 195, but remember, you can hit somebody twice. It does 50% less damage on the subsequent hit, but that's still like almost 300 damage every 5 seconds, right? Instead of every 10 seconds. And if you're sticking, this is going to allow you to stick 2 people. It's a 50% slow as well. And it just does that AoE damage. And it's wave clear. So you're not always the one last hitting minions, but this will help you push it out faster to allow other people to clear those minions. So I think it's probably really underrated, especially if you're going to go Frozen Heart early on, which I think is probably really good on him because he does care about the mana. Then you're not going to run out of mana as much. You're going to be able to spam your E's in team fights, and Frozen Heart is still just a really good item. And your base item now, your chapter, whatever the hell it's called, your starting support item has mana regen on it now, Before, you didn't get that. You got Relic Shield, you didn't have the mana regen. But now that you have the mana regen, you can actually use that E a little bit more early on to kind of push out a little bit to get priority in lane. So I think that's really underrated that people forget about Nautilus, is that he's one of the best, like, tank melee champions at getting priority. Because you can use your E to help push a wave if you have to, and then you've still got your Q available, you still have your defensive steroid, like, you can still kind of fight, and the E is a really low cooldown. So you can still kind of fight if you use that to wave clear, versus with a lot of other supports, you use, like, your Recon W to try to wave clear, you're very, very vulnerable, so you better only do that if you're about to back. So I think those are just a couple of perks that are underrated on Nautilus that you could see. I still highly recommend going Ulti Hunter plus Zombie Ward. I don't know why the Triumph's Tenacity, like, maybe that's okay, man, but I'm telling you, Zombie Ward is really, really good. Like, that extra vision is a very big deal. There's a lot of objectives that matter right now in the game. You've got the worms, you have Rift, you have Baron, obviously dragons, but then you have the Empowered Scuttle. Is a very big deal. That's a massive sweeper. That's huge opportunities for extra zombie wards. You have the red and the blue buffs being team buffs now, so those are basically objectives. So it's just objectives everywhere, and that means vision is really, really good. So I would still do zombie ulti hunter with him. And then the last few, I know we're over an hour, so we'll move through this quickly. Leona has a higher win rate in solo queue. Obviously doesn't have very much pro presence, but I think a big part of this is she is just a lot easier to bully people and engage with her in lane, especially if you're on strong side, if you're not going to get ganked, or you have your jungler kind of shadowing you, backing you up if you do get ganked. She's got almost a 54% win rate, and her big thing is she can engage anytime, anywhere. She can go through minions, which, you know, a lot of other supports can't, except for, like, Maokai. Can comfortably engage through minions. Your W blocks a lot of damage early on, especially minion damage. People forget, if you want to engage through minions, they're going to attack you a lot. And so your W actually reduces minion damage by quite a bit in the early game. Quite a bit of damage and really low cooldowns. So when you get on somebody, you can stick to them, like, a lot as Leona. And her ultimate's a 90-second cooldown early on. So that means when you get ahead, you can just keep spamming those ults, keep getting those kills over and over and over again. Especially against immobile AD carries, or AD carries that don't have dashes, now that Gale Force is out of the game. Like Jhin, Misfortune, Caitlyn, Jinx. There's a lot of champs right now that are meta that don't have that dash to avoid your R. So all of your stuff is affected by tenacity. You don't have knockups, unlike Nautilus and Rakan. So if they get Mercury Treads, that is kind of rough. But very, very good, super aggressive choice. If you think, you know, you're going to be on strong side, or you're going to be able to hard dominate the lane. Okay. Blitzcrank, we already talked about him. Same drill. Still very good if you're landing those hooks all the time. Excellent user of Trailblazer Locket or Trailblazer Frozen Heart. You know, whatever you want to get. Items really don't matter. You just got to be able to land those hooks. And if you do, you're probably going to win the game. Janna's still okay. Kind of like what I was talking about with Melio. It's like you can peel, but you kind of lack that engage. I would probably rather play Melio. Janna probably scales harder in team fights late game. She does have a lot more peel. So she's just a bit more extreme on the peel, and she does have better steroids, right? So if you put your shield on an 80 carry, you give them like 50 extra AD after the scaling with your AP. That can be really good. But you just don't have as many like early game aggression options as Melio does. Like you can spam W on him, but it's not the same as Melio's W and trading with the ADC. So Janna's still good, still has a high win rate, but just kind of lacks that engage. And then Zyra's another one that I'll just kind of put up here as just kind of respecting the win rate. She's got like a 54% win rate right now. I don't know. My issue with Zyra for a long time has just been you can hard dominate your lane, push in, but then later in the game, it's just really hard to make anything happen. Like, you can potentially kill people out of the brush if you get fed enough, but there are quite a few answers to AP out there. AP is very popular in the meta, so there's going to be a lot of Mercury Treads walking around. If someone gets Chaotic Rooker and you're never going to kill them. They took out Demonic, which kind of hurts her. Although she probably is very good with Malignance. I would imagine your ult can hit a lot of people. Looks like people are just going Rylai's. Man, it is a cheap option. The slow is cool, but I don't know. She has a high win rate, but I just don't think the items suit her very well. It's very expensive. As you see, she just kind of falls off a cliff. Although that's still 52%. Like, that's not ridiculously horrible. But if you're going to be on strong side, you're going to be able to hard bully and dominate, especially off of just one item with Leandre. She does use that super well. You can get her. She is a very good user of Morello. So she obviously has, strengths about her. It's not that she's bad. It's just that if you don't hard snowball on her, you're going to get outscaled, and it's going to be really awkward trying to rotate through river or trying to get vision, at 25 minutes in the game, because anyone that is like even on the same screen as you in 2024 is probably going to kill you, because there's so many champions that have like a billion dashes and ways to get over walls, and you're like just this old slow like season 3 champion with your walker trying to get through the jungle. You're just going to get run down. So anyways, okay, well that's about it. I won't keep it too much longer. I will note that I have Karma down in B tier. She was pretty hyped up. Everyone thought she was going to be good. I talked about it earlier in the patch notes. It just hasn't really played out that way. She is getting picked quite a bit. Highest pick rate champion, but pretty low win rate compared to a lot of the other champs. It's only 50%. She can bully early on. Her numbers are better, especially if you go AP. Maybe she's better in the solo lanes. Now, I'm not sure. But I'm just not seeing the numbers in solo queue. And historically, she's just had a really hard time in most metas, right? She just doesn't have the CC. She doesn't have the steroids that some other champs have. So I went ahead and put her down there. But if you're in the right kind of lane, Ezreal, Karma, and you're just getting left alone and you just get to hard poke them under tower, she's probably still pretty good. Seraphine has been talked about a lot as being really OP as an AD carry, and I know statistically that was true for a while there. Still pretty good at 55%, but I just don't think that translates into support as well. Her unique thing is that you don't have to play an AD carry with her, and I think she was exploiting the double gold item stuff for a little while too. She has a lot of CC with her ultimate, so it's okay, but I just don't think you're going to have enough AP to really make her Qs hit hard enough to matter in the mid to late game. So I don't know. I just feel like there are better options if you want to run an enchanter down there, but you probably can still win. Lulu can be really good with the usual suspects, like your Kog'Maw, your Jinxes, that type of stuff. She did get nerfed. I think her W a few patches ago got a bit of a longer cooldown, but she's still okay. I'd probably rather play Melio, but if you have a lot of confidence in your AD carry to hard carry, she still has some of the best steroids in the game. Pix is still going to be hitting for 80 plus damage, around level 9 or 10. And then you've got the attack speed and the movement speed off of the W. So she can still be pretty good in the right kind of matchup. Nami, obviously, with Lucian is very good. I don't know if I'd play her with that many other AD carries, but I think she's underrated. If you land those bubbles early on, she can be a kill threat. So she's one of the few enchanters that also poses a pretty heavy kill threat early on. Later on, her CC is a bit more conditional. Her wave is pretty slow. It doesn't CC for very long, but can be good. Great at interrupting the Xerath and Jhin ultimates. So if you slam the lane hard and take over later, she can be good, but it just kind of depends. I don't think she's going to scale as hard as some of the other enchanter options. And then Renata is popular in Pro, but I'm still not quite convinced in like Emerald and lower that she's going to be great. If you pair her together with somebody who can bully early on, I think she can be good. But she is very vulnerable. She's really squishy. So I would probably rather just play some of these other options. But she is still quite good. I wouldn't argue if someone wanted to put her in A tier. And that's pretty much it. So I think a lot of stuff is very viable right now. I mean, if you go in and look though at support, this is some of the most sort of viable options out there. There aren't that many with a really high pick rate. There's what, like 3 champs that have a double-digit pick rate. So there's a lot of stuff being picked out there. Pretty reasonable win rates on most things, except for Maokai. There aren't that many things that are like 54 or higher. You've got Maokai, you've got Bard, but a lot of the most popular champs are kind of in that 50 to 54 range. So I think that support is pretty well balanced right now overall, with a couple outliers on the strong side, but overall still pretty good. Anyways, that's it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.